Hey everyone, you're listening to the official podcast of 4playernetwork.com. Check us out at that address for everything you need to know about our community, monthly giveaways, and nightly live streams. You can even support us on Patreon at patreon.com/4player. And last but not least, you can catch the live recordings of these podcasts every single Thursday night on our Twitch channel. We hope to see you there. Enjoy. Second time's the charm. Hey everyone, welcome to 4Player Plus, a bonus podcast here at 4playernetwork.com. I'm your host, Nick Henderson. Joining me tonight is Brad Simons.
Yes, what's up?
Crispy.
Hello.
And Chris Davis.
Hello.
I could just hear the agitation in Brad's voice because, like, God damn it, we just did a roll call and you were asking me to chime in again. But anyways, it is, what is this? Oh yeah, it's 420 Blaze It.
Oh shit.
Sorry, we booted Carlos off the stream tonight. He was supposed to do his Resident Evil 4 weed run, but
Then we remembered it's technically illegal in Texas.
Yeah.
Technically. So here we are. It's we're not doing a regular podcast tonight. As obviously I said, it's 4Player Plus. We're doing a top 3. We're a little overdue for this. It's been kind of slow lately as far as like headlines and new releases and whatnot, but it's like we're about to like hit the fucking we're about to get like Zelda and Redfall and Star Wars. Like it's about to be nonstop for like the next like 3 months at least.
It's the calm before the storm.
Calm before the storm. So we figured tonight would be a great opportunity to record a top 3.
It's
and
all
tonight,
been storm. We've just been you motherfuckers. All this cool shit's out, and I've not had any time to play it, and it's been making me sad. And hey, the storm has happened. It's been happening since January.
I know it's been a crazy fucking year. So tonight we are going to talk. We're doing a top 3, like I said. So tonight the topic of conversation was actually was inspired by Brad's deep-seated love affair with Double Fine's recent 32-part docuseries, PsychOdyssey. If you've heard him talk about it on the podcast quite frequently over the past month, and he's been trying to encourage people to watch this beast of a documentary, which I hear is amazing.
It's only 22 hours long. It's okay. You have plenty of time to watch it.
But in the spirit of this enthusiasm, tonight we are going to be discussing our top 3 games that we would watch a 32-part docuseries about the development of. I know the title tonight doesn't flow off the tongue, but like that's kind of it, the topic in a nutshell.
But maybe we can call it a 22-hour docuseries about. Maybe that rolls on.
I don't think. I think it's about the same.
It's
but
less than a day.
Before we get to that, just a little bit of housekeeping. One, we are going to do a Fantasy Critic update tonight, but since we're doing a bonus podcast this week, we're going to save it for the end. So, if you want to hear the latest and greatest about that, stick around after the top 3. Also, I was really slow getting the Revival Club off the ground in 2023. We took a break for the Game of the Year content at the end of 2022, and then, as you all probably noticed, we started 2023 off hot, and it's just been crazy. It's been a crazy year for video games. I have not been able to find time to really play much of anything outside of like the latest and greatest. So I was dragging my feet a bit, and there was a lot of frustration trying to figure out what game we're gonna play, and it finally came down to I said, Brad, make an executive decision, and Brad made an executive decision right there on the spot. Boom, we're playing Final Fantasy VI officially. Playing Final Fantasy VI for the Revival Club right now. I have never played Final Fantasy VI. It is one of my greatest gaming shames. So I'm finally resolving this. I'll be streaming it until I finish it, and we'll be talking about it on a podcast eventually. But if you're interested in playing along and being a part of the discussion about the game in Discord, you can support us on Patreon. You can support us on Twitch. Either way, it'll get you access to the Discord channels that you need to participate. And of course, I'll be looking for a community guest to join us on the podcast when we're done to talk about it. So yeah, I think that's it for housekeeping. We can just jump straight into the conversation because, like I said, there's lots to unpack here. I don't know Brad, do you want to set the topic up?
Sure. I mean, you kind of mentioned it or teased it or suggested it was maybe related to the PsychOdyssey docuseries, which, by the way, I have seen like so much more than just PsychOdyssey from 2Player Productions. I guess time at Double Fine. They have filmed so much stuff.
The
They're
Amnesia
like full-time
Fortnite.
employees and full-time employees of Double Fine now, which is crazy to think about, right? Because they're still like more or less like this unbiased, you know,
Third
group.
party, or
But I mean, I've gone back. I've watched the Double Fine Adventure, which is like, interesting, right? Because I don't actually care about that game or point. I don't even like point and click adventures, but it's still really fascinating to see kind of, the behind the scenes, because there's so much to it. And I've been watching like the Amnesia Fortnights, which are also long docuseries, is about their 2-week game jams they do every year. And that's been really fascinating, just because seeing how people come together to create things is fascinating, from all the different angles, from all like the hard conversations about time and budget, and like just drama over, like programmers versus, design, and just art. It's so interesting. I mean, I keep telling people you should watch this stuff if you care about video games, if you like video games, you love video games, if you like talking about them, you have to see this shit,
that
because
sounds like us.
there's never been like a more thorough like look into the creation of something like this than, this 22-hour, like all the stuff that 2Player Productions has been doing with Double Fine. And it's fascinating, and it's just like, you know it's great. And it has got me thinking about what other, and I feel like we've always thought about, especially with trouble projects, about games where you just, I can't wait till the tell all, 10, 20 years from now, where someone
Right.
finally says, what the fuck was going on with this project, right? And to
sometimes that never
see,
happens. Like sometimes we never find out.
of course it never happens. Like what happened with Double Fine is like unprecedented, like getting like this inside look, the conversations that no one would ever expect to see, of like, are we going to be a company, or are we going to be able to make payroll in a week, that stuff. Like, who's going to buy us, the,
Yeah.
the CEO of the company that is funding our game just got arrested, like the stuff that you never expected to see, you get to see, and it's fascinating. And there's games I love, projects that I've always had questions about, where I would love to see, this sort of look. And I guess that's the
and
topic,
also,
right?
I think Mr. Papa Shot in chat makes a really good point too. It's worth also giving a shout out to No Clip documentaries, because they have a whole YouTube channel full of. I mean, it's not obviously the same thing, because they're like they're shorter documentaries focused on a bunch of different stuff. But
no clip
like,
is more. It honestly feels less technical and more like emotional in how they're talking about those games. And just, I mean, they've only got like 30 minutes to an hour to explain the development over 5 years, of a lot of projects.
It's just different. And that's a more like traditional, like talking head style, like documentary about like a topic. Like this is a film crew filming, this studio for 7 years, in case in case of Psychonauts 2, right? 7 years every day, and then piecing that together. And like, just the conversations and the looks, like, it'll zoom in on someone's like reaction and stuff to like, what the fuck, like you're getting you're getting so much with this. It's a very different thing. Everyone should watch it.
I think there's I think there's a lot of really different approaches you can take in a documentary and stuff. So like when I was thinking about the games that I wanted to mention tonight that I would be most interested in seeing this kind of thing about it, a lot of times it was coming at it from a very specific angle. And I think that, again, not the same exact thing, but like they did a documentary about the making of God of War 2018. And it was shorter, but it was coming from a very specific. It was coming from a very specific place, which was how do you completely reinvent a franchise? And then like it was the whole thing was like building up to the reveal, and like the kind of the finale of the documentary was like that reveal, which we were in the room for. Crispy, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, but I mean that's a big part of like Psychodices as well, so, right? Building up to like these reveals, to like new trailers, reactions, seeing those reactions from both the team and the fans. Like that stuff is super interesting. And I was kind of thinking about that too when like where do I want to be a fly on the wall when they have like the people in the studio have a conversation after like a reveal maybe goes really poorly or something, like that stuff is super fascinating.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So I
So,
do we should get started, but yeah, I mean I can go
but
first, but
yeah, why don't you start us off first? So let's get the ball rolling on this. What is your first
geez,
pick for the
let
night?
me pull up my list here.
Also, while he's
uh,
looking at that, I want to mention, and this is something I tried a little bit because I do try to like get people in the community to kind of like submit their ideas and whatnot. And I haven't really found like the best way to do it. I tried something a little different, and I think it worked out this week. So at the end, I did I did a Google survey and just posted it in our Discord at discord.gg/4player, and we got about 7 or 8 responses there. So I will kind of blow through those at the end, and we'll have some honorable mentions from the community as well. So,
okay,
anyway,
well I guess
Brad.
my number 3 on this list of I really want to see the years and years of zoom ins on reactions. Every time Hideo Kojima opens up his mouth, I want to zoom in on the guy on the other side of the room going, "What the fuck?" But yeah, Metal Gear Solid 5, that's the one, right? The crazy fucking bloated, like crazy game, crazy project, and which also led to, and I'm assuming would encompass like the studio falling apart, like Kojima getting quote unquote fired. I don't know. I was when I was thinking of this topic, it was a lot of like Japanese games, I think, because we never get like a look inside those studios. We don't even get like these, very corporate-y like promotion type, like, like the God of War one or whatever, right? Which is mostly
Mhm.
just a puff piece, really. I don't know. It was cool. But I mean, we don't get anything with a lot of these projects. And I feel like Hideo Kojima stuff, like Kojima Productions, Konami of all things, that stuff is so sort of locked down, locked tight. Still, no one knows what fucking happened with that game. Was he fired? Why was he fired? How do you fire Hideo Kojima? Like, who makes the only
The game is
relevant?
also really interesting from other perspectives. Like, I wouldn't
No,
want the
of
whole
course.
documentary to be about
How did
Hideo
that game
Kojima and what
became
happened
what
there.
it became? Like this weird
I
open
want to know what it
world,
started
like,
as and how
you
it
know?
became what it was.
I want to hear the conversations about Quiet, right? Like again, y'all haven't seen
From
Psychodicy,
Chico.
so I feel like y'all don't truly know the potential here. But like, if I had that stuff put with Metal Gear Solid, it would blow my fucking mind. Because
Are you talking about like how the
how much
decision
of
was made to have her breathe through her skin or whatever it was?
well,
You'll
I
be
mean,
ashamed for
weird.
your words and deeds once you find out exactly why she does that.
Hideo Kojima is like the like video game auteur, right? And like in terms of that sort of reputation. And I wonder like what is that like? What is that studio culture like, right? Is there even like truth to that? Because sometimes that stuff kind of gets blown out of proportion, right? Or they sort of go with it, right? Because it helps like market a game, or like the fans are really into it. That sort of shit, right? Like everybody thinks like Miyamoto made like every awesome Nintendo game ever, right? But he like all these other people are responsible for directing all these amazing games. and
Right.
and I don't know, like I feel like that's like sort of the perfect like game that sort of disappointed a lot of people, but was like exciting and like cool in a lot of ways, but was
I mean,
also like, and it was like a departure for the series. And then it went bad, and they started like removing his name from everything, and everyone's like, what the fuck is going on? And I want to see those conversations, those reactions to all this shit happen inside the studio.
don't
And
forget too. There's
from Konami and stuff, right? I want to see the conversations with executives at Konami, because that's the kind
yeah.
of stuff again that was in PsychOdyssey. And like, I don't know, it's cool.
Also, two other aspects of that game that I would love to see, kind of the behind the scenes stuff, would be would be the one that the way they chose to reveal that game. Remember, it was announced originally. What was it? What was it called when they first revealed
The Phantom Pain.
the Phantom?
Oh
Yeah, that's right. The
yeah,
Phantom Pain. Yeah,
the whole
where we
marketing, like,
where they tried to
oh,
pretend it wasn't even a Metal Gear game for a while. Like
oh
that was
my
crazy.
god.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Moby Dick Studio, like they
yeah,
were all
yeah,
walking.
Moby Dick Studios. Like, I want to know how all of that shit happened. And
And like,
two, obviously,
is this guy real or CG?
yeah.
That's wild.
And then the other interesting thing I think was the decision to go with Kiefer Sutherland as Snake.
Oh
You know what I
my
mean?
god, yes, those
Oh, fuck
conversations
that.
with fucking David Hayter and shit. Oh
It
my
would be
god, fuck that
fascinating.
game.
That game. Here's the thing. Like at the end of the day, wasn't that game still really fucking cool? Like
Technically
Yeah.
speaking,
blemishes and all?
yes. Like the game, that was one of the most fascinating gameplay experiences of that entire generation.
It was
that
cool.
engine
It
was
was
so
like-
fucking cool.
I don't
I
think anybody
just-
would say it's their favorite Metal Gear, right? But like, still,
No, maybe they would. They would.
Maybe they
like,
would. I
You
mean-
know, dumb people or whatever. You know,
I just-
stupos.
I just think that
Stupos might say that.
if you're gonna do Metal Gear Solid 5, there's a lot of dark shit that's gonna have to end up being discussed. Like,
wait, that is Metal Gear Solid 5. That's literally Metal Gear Solid 5.
No, like I'm talking about both Phantom Pain and Ground Zeroes. Like, what happens with?
Oh yeah, you could talk about Ground
The
Zeroes.
conversation around ground zeros, like why, you know, that might have been like a funding thing, right? Like that shit
Mhm.
happens too. Like it was like with, you know, Broken Age, they were like, we don't have enough money to finish this game. We need to chop this up and put it out just so we have enough money to finish the rest of this game. Like that, those sorts of decisions of like, what the fuck are we supposed to do?
Damn, Brad, you should have saved
What?
that one for last because I feel like this is of all the games we're going to talk about tonight. I think this one has the
we'll
potential to
see.
maybe actually fill like
Well,
22
yeah.
hours worth of documentary. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, anything
I mean?
does, right? Even a like a mediocre point and click adventure game, right? Like that's what I'm saying. You'd be surprised how much there is there that is actually super fascinating.
Well, then let's dig a little deeper. Let's go. Unless you have any objections, we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, go.
I want to keep it moving because we have a lot more to go. So, Crispy, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Man,
He's still wrestling with that third game.
Overwatch.
I'm not wrestling with the third game, but I do think that like my specific interest in watching video game production documentaries,
Mhm.
kind of skews more towards I want to see stories about failure. I want to see stories about like train wrecks. I want to
Sure.
see stories about corporate greed and how the sort of semi-hostile yet symbiotic nature of corporate art kind of, you know,
For sure.
stifles as much as it creates, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like our industry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think any documentary about the production of a game that doesn't even like touch on that kind of subject is a missed opportunity at the very least. Which is why I would start with what I think is an easier subject, but would still be interesting. I would start with a documentary about the failure of StarCraft Ghost.
Ooh.
There you go. I was going to mention that one. Yeah.
Because not just because it's like a personal thing for me, right? Like I was a huge StarCraft fan when I was a kid, loved the fuck out of Brood War, and when I heard that they were doing this third-person action game that was like gonna be on the fucking Xbox, and you were gonna play as a ghost, and you were gonna be able to like do shit like you do in the game, like call down nuclear strikes and, you know, turn invisible and do ninja shit, like, oh man, sold. Day one buy for me, right? And I followed that project from early middle school through like 2 years of college, you know?
God damn.
Before it was finally like officially announced, no, it's dead. We're done, right?
Oof, yeah.
And in that time, that game got bounced around to a couple different studios. It was kind of left hanging in limbo for a while because if you remember, that game was not actually internally developed by Blizzard. It was farmed out, and I should have looked up the name of the studios that both worked on it, but I didn't.
I did
I'm
not
sorry.
realize that.
But yeah, that was a big deal at the time because that was like the first game that Blizzard. I mean, this is like Golden Age Blizzard. This is like StarCraft, Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, like in the early days of World of Warcraft Blizzard. You know what I mean? Like they were still like golden child studio in the industry.
I've
And
got
they
the names for you, by
never.
the way, if you want them.
What were they?
It first went to Nihilistic Studios, which are responsible for such classics as Marvel Nemesis: Rise of the Imperfects.
Oh man, I remember that game.
We dodged a
Weird.
bullet.
That was a video game. And then after that, it went to Swinging Ape Studios, responsible for, among other things, Metal Arms Glitch in the System.
Okay,
which
and
is a
what
great
was
game.
interesting about that is when they made the switch to Swinging Ape Studios, they doubled down on like the problems with the game, and they were like, you know what, we're also gonna add a competitive multiplayer mode to this too. Like, and that what, like, for me, I guess I was probably 16, 17 at the time they first started talking about that, and I was like, oh fuck yeah. I can't
So
I
you
can't
always
even.
wanted your games to be Destiny, huh?
Well, I mean, this is before anyone ever had any idea of what that would even be like. This was going to be Halo, except you could be a Terran Space Marine or like a Firebat or a Ghost, or you could drive a siege tank. Like, that was like a dream game idea to me at the time. I fucking loved StarCraft so much that I would have loved the idea to play like a fucking Marine in an action game setting, especially if it was a competitive one. This was like my Halo days. It was just generally speaking my language and reverberating with what I was into. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think this story represents a really interesting edge case because this is like coming out of the 90s, going into the early 2000s, and then into the late 2000s. And it's Blizzard kind of like at their height, at like their nostalgic golden days, the Blizzard that people think of when they think of like the shame that is the fall of Blizzard,
When they
right?
have positive feelings about Blizzard, they think of
And,
this era.
and this game didn't just fail for no reason. I think this story, and I've read like op-eds about this, that like people, I think Jason Schreier wrote one like 6 or 7 years ago, when he was still at Kotaku. Uh, but like every story about the development of this game that comes out just kind of reeks with this like late 90s tech company decadence. You know what I mean? Like the idea that like the first studio developers who were working on the game would say like, oh, we would work on a new design for like a Space Marine, and then we'd take that design down the road to Blizzard because they worked right down the road from Blizzard's office. And then they would go into a meeting with Blizzard like story execs and designers, and they would sit there and have a meeting for hours just about like the design of a Space Marine boot. Like, there was just no focus whatsoever. There was no infrastructure in place for not only like reining in Blizzard's own creative kind of decadence, but like for managing an outside team doing it for you as well. Like, they had no experience with that. They could not even like they could not they could not transfer their creative process to scale very well on their own, let alone shipping it out to another studio. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah,
like that.
literally an episode devoted to that meeting. It's just like a fly on the wall in that meeting talking about some stupid detail, like
Well,
a boot or whatever.
yeah, and this game was one of those ones by all accounts that like you hear about where like it stays in production for so long that like the head developers like will go home and play a new game and see something in it and be like, oh my god, that's a crazy idea, and then come back and be like, hey, we got to figure out how to put this into StarCraft Ghost.
Feature
So
creep.
StarCraft
Feature
Ghost
creep.
was just kind of becoming, yeah, it was just being this bucket that they kept throwing features and ideas, and like the scope of it just fucking ballooned out of control. And it was a bunch of like, this is still like before Project Titan Blizzard, like Project, or is that what it was called,
I
the
think
Titan,
so, yeah.
Overwatch game, like the game that they were
Yeah.
working on
Yeah, it
that
was
failed,
Titan.
that they took all their creative assets and turned into Overwatch. Like that Overwatch, or like Project Titan, like really kind of like changed the culture of that studio and turned it into like what we would think of as being like modern day Blizzard. But this is before that. This is like before they had really like missed on a swing this
I also
bad,
find I find it fascinating, these like larger companies or whatever that you know are believed to, like, they only put out like gold, right? And Blizzard was definitely one of those at a time. Like the conversations of like when they finally cancel a game, is it like maybe this game would have come out and it would have been okay and some people would have liked it and it would have been a 7, but I feel like they were one of those studios where a 7 is unacceptable. It doesn't live up to the rest of our gold, so we're just going to cancel it. And there's
Well, there's
lots of companies out
0
there that are kind
points.
of like that in certain eras, and I bet like Valve was probably like that at a time, or like Nintendo, or there are these companies that don't want like L's, or even if they're
yeah.
not truly L's, because it ruins their image. And I bet ultimately that's why they decided to put the axe on something like that.
My
Companies that had a
my
lot of money, but still, this is subpar. We're gonna
right. My impression of that situation has always been that like that was the Blizzard line of like, well, we're not going to release a subpar project, but it was only a subpar product because they couldn't offer any kind of support in the creation of it. Like they were trying to farm it out to a smaller studio with less experience and still produce a Blizzard game, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like I really think it's a story about how this company like started believing its own hype and then bit off way more than it could chew and failed spectacularly and ultimately publicly in a way that it never had before but would come to again very soon.
Right. Yeah, that would definitely be fascinating.
I just realized I've read both those Jason Schreier books. Y'all didn't read those either, did y'all?
I read it. I've read the first one. I have not read the second one yet.
There's so much like really
Motherfucker.
good stuff out there about the development of games, you motherfuckers. And Chris Davis has not read Masters of Doom. How dare you? You haven't bought it. It's on bottom. It's not high on your list. What the fuck were you telling me?
I never said it wasn't high on my list. I said I've got dozens of books I need to read.
No,
Find me some fucking time.
Books. What the hell?
Find some time.
All right.
Okay.
Let's not worry about that. God damn it, Brett.
Masters of Splinter Cell. Will you read that?
Chris Davis, tell us your first pick for the night.
Okay. So for my first pick, I have a question for y'all just to clarify things. All right.
Okay.
Does it have to be about a specific video game?
Oh,
I think that was the goal, yes. But this motherfucker, you're about to like
you
name
do this
drop a
all
whole
the
series.
time. It's such a straightforward topic.
Well, no, I wasn't going to talk
like a movie or something.
I wasn't going to talk about a specific series. I was going to talk about a developer.
That's too broad, though.
Too broad?
It is pretty broad. But like,
pick
there
a
has to be a
project
game that makes you think about this developer, right? Like, there. And
Yeah,
I mean, we're like
too
balls deep in this
broad,
recording,
right?
so I'm gonna let.
Yeah, I want to know how Valve works, okay? But that's not fair. That's not.
You tell us the developer, we'll pick the game.
How about I do a game from that developer, but I intro talking about the developer. How about that?
Sure. Fair enough. Go ahead.
For my number 3 pick, the developer I'm choosing to talk about is one that has developed so many great games and has been such a pillar of my gaming career that I both love and hate them for so many reasons. But I'm talking about specifically Ubisoft Montreal.
I knew you were going to say that.
Ubisoft Montreal.
Oh, boy.
You want a Splinter Cell documentary, goddammit. That's what you want.
Splinter Cell Conviction.
I want a Splinter Cell documentary. I want
super fascinating.
I want a documentary about so many things they've worked on. And Splinter Cell is on my mind today because it came out that evidently there was a whole brand new dedicated Spies vs. Mercs game that was in development that got canceled. So I'm upset about that, but that's a whole other conversation.
You made that sound better than it was. It was some, desperate battle royale.
It's Spies vs. Mercs. That's all I want in my life. I live in a desert.
Battle royale game. That was.
I don't care. It's Spies vs. Mercs. I need this in my life, and it's not. I haven't had it in a decade.
Are we going with
But
Conviction?
the game I want to talk about does not have Clancy in the name. It's actually very specifically Assassin's Creed 3.
The Crew.
Whoa, that's fascinating. Okay.
The Crew.
So why the third one?
The racing game?
No.
The Crew.
So So Ubisoft Montreal started the Assassin's Creed franchise up. This spiritual successor to Prince of Persia that they've never really.
Oh, that would have been really interesting, right? The birth of Assassin's Creed from Prince of Persia, because it started as Prince of Persia.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that would be that'd be really good to watch. But my focus is specifically on Assassin's Creed 3 because number one, that was the 5th entry in the franchise at that point in about 5 years.
We are talking about specifically not part 3 of the Ezio trilogy, but actual Assassin's Creed 3.
Actual Assassin's Creed 3, not Revelations.
Okay.
But it was the 5th entry in the franchise. The 5th game in, I believe, 5 years. They were trying to annualize this shit.
I mean, they didn't just try. I mean, unless you're
succeeded for
gauging
several of them.
success, like unless you're
Yeah.
gauging success on how like critically successful these games were, they were absolutely annualized for a good long time.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it made it all the way up until like Origins was the first game that I think broke the streak of being annual. Like it was the first one. There was like a 2-year gap between that and the previous one.
I don't remember
think.
exactly. But
But
this was
it was
this was the big one for Ubisoft with this franchise.
also the one I was probably the most excited about of all the Assassin's Creeds. Even to this day, probably the most excited I've ever been for an Assassin's Creed game out of all the ones they've ever announced, and perhaps the most disappointed by.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is such a fascinating game to think about. This was going to be the conclusion to the overall narrative that they had built up for 5 games straight. It was on a brand new engine, on believe Anvil Next, it was largely a very different experience in many ways. It was set in the United States or in colonial America. You played as a Native American.
It all sounds amazing. I mean, and
yeah,
to its credit, it did some things right, and I still ultimately like that game. It's just too much. It's such a fucking mess in some other ways.
And it did such interesting stuff with. Okay, I have been and always will be fascinated with the meta narrative of the Assassin's Creed franchise. How it's about 2 secret societies at war with each other for thousands of years, and how all of history is interconnected into this war between them. And just
it's pretty cool on paper. That's for
it
sure.
really is. And Assassin's Creed 3 was like the culmination of event because the whole storyline was building to December 23rd, 2012, when there's supposed to be this gigantic ecological disaster that hits the planet and trying to find some way to prevent it. And so that's what you had been doing for 4 games straight, was building up your understanding of the ones who came before, this ancient civilization who invented humanity, invented humans. And you were trying to find resources from that.
Yes, that is what Assassin's Creed was until I guess I don't remember the specifics of what happened in 3 at the end, but at some point they made a decision that I mean you don't need to go into spoilers. I mean, we can't talk about specifics.
No, I have to go to spoilers to talk about this.
I don't let them spoil it. No one they threw it all into the trash with.
They fucking threw it in the trash.
That is the thing I want to know about. I would watch
the conversation. That's the meeting I want to see, right?
I would watch an entire.
By the way, this is all real dumb, and we're just gonna make fun of it now.
I would watch an entire documentary about how the Assassin's Creed story started and then went off the rails.
Are you saying we're gonna fist fight the Pope? This is what you're telling me.
That was when the game was good. It was when they fist fought the Pope, man.
Yeah, no, that was really good. I mean, all the Assassin's Creed games up to 3 were all great experiences. You know, I obviously 1 was the weakest experience, but that was also the first title in the series. They were still trying things out. But in 3, they had 4 games worth of knowledge and experience and a brand new engine to experiment with new things on. And in some ways, they succeed in creating this excellent experience. This was the first game in which they had going out on the ship and going out and fighting the British at sea, which spawned Assassin's Creed 4, which has gone on to be the best ship combat game probably ever made. It has been haunting Ubisoft ever since they made that game.
It's still there's Skull and Bones, baby. Skull and Bones.
Yeah, yeah. But it's just so interesting to me that they put so much effort into this game, and I think they largely succeeded. But it is just so overshadowed by just
that is another game like what Crispy was talking about with Ghost that suffered from feature creep. It just got away from them, and then instead of doing a couple things really, really well, they ended up doing a bunch of things kind of mediocre. So The
Like,
dangers of feature creep in game development are real.
Yeah, but also like the dangers, again, going back to the narrative of building toward this penultimate event that logically should be the conclusion of the series narratively, and then realizing, oh, we've already got 3 other projects in the pipeline that are going to continue from this. How do we handle this?
There's more
And
money
they had
to be made.
no fucking idea. And
Yeah,
the
you wanna
way
talk
they
about what
solved it
Crispy
was
was saying.
just cut it out. They just
Yeah.
got rid of this grand narrative that they could have done so fucking much with, and just moved on to just
Yeah.
focusing on granted, the core experience of the game. But in my opinion, and this is me ranting, but when you cut out the narrative backing to it that really ties everything together, it just feels like you're just going on historical adventures.
You're
And
treading water.
You're treading
What's
water.
treading water?
That, dude. Are you telling me you don't like a good like like a Law and Order type procedural show where nothing's really connected and it's just about like
I don't think that's the point here, Brett.
crime of the
No,
week?
that's
I think the point is if they wanted to do
Yeah,
that,
like
everything
Battlestar
connected.
Galactica.
if they wanted to do that and they wanted to have all of these just disparate like historical stories that were kind of unconnected, they should have started that way. Instead, they started building towards something and then at some point decided to throw the baby out with the bathwater because they wanted to make more money. And that's really frustrating. And it would be fascinating to
Make
watch
more
how those
money.
decisions. Yeah, dude, like what do you mean? What are you talking about? Instead of letting that series end where it should have, like, from, a narrative perspective, they decided they wanted to keep annualizing this franchise and keep, farming
and
it.
and the series
which they're
became
still
better
doing.
because of it.
I mean, we can't get into this debate right now. I think we could have an entire podcast debating this exact point. So we're going to move on. But that is a very inspired choice, Chris Davis. Thank you.
It's just a really interesting game. It's one of like, but overall for Ubisoft, this was like a turning point for that entire publisher, because after that point, honestly, they've just been on a downhill trend, and it's getting kind of dangerous for them.
I mean,
from
I don't
where they
know.
are.
I don't know
Are
if I
you
agree with
saying the
that, because
downhill trend started with Assassin's Creed 3?
Are you threatening them?
I think AC3 and 4 were the peak periods for that franchise and a lot of Ubisoft as a whole, and just ever since then, it's just been precipitous.
I think perspective really matters here, because it really kind of depends on which aspects of Ubisoft you're most interested in. Because some people would say Assassin's Creed became a much better franchise after that happened, and like I
mean,
said,
sure.
that could be, and Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft continue to be incredibly successful. In their own right.
You say that, but like, think about how many
Ubisoft.
games have been announced and either canceled or just disappeared into the ether in the past 10
Ubisoft
years.
is not doing well.
They are not doing well.
We need to move on. We need to move on, and we need to be cognizant of this, because we still got 2 more rounds of this afterwards, and I haven't even got my first pick yet. So
Go.
my first pick tonight is going to be a game that was in development hell for, I think, about a decade, maybe more, but eventually, ultimately, came out and was very good, and that's Alan Wake. Remedy was working on Alan Wake, and if you remember the development period, like that was a game that went through several iterations and then disappeared off the radar for years at a time, and it became vaporware. And it was one of those projects that, like, everyone was like, well, I guess they just abandoned that, and nobody knew what the fuck they were working on for a while. And then it finally kind of reemerged in, what was that, 2009, and it ended up coming out in 2010. And that game ultimately, I mean, for me, it ended up being kind of it was an amazing, one of my favorite gaming experiences ever. It's on my top 10 games of all time. I fucking adored that game. But I would watch a documentary series, I want to see that game go from, like, concept into development hell to final revision. I want to see all of those, what do you call them? I want to see like the mile markers in this project, and I want to see how it developed over time, and I want to see the points where it fell apart and completely was reimagined, because that game started as a very specific idea, and then I think ultimately ended up in a very different place. There's been some, like, talk about what this project was at some point and kind of the trouble that it went through, but I don't think we've ever gotten a really detailed look at how it became what it ultimately ended
Well,
up being.
if you're curious about like how this stuff happens, might I recommend a 32-part docuseries called PsychOdyssey, Nick, and you'll really understand how when yeah.
I mean,
But
you're right. I mean, that's why we're talking about this tonight. And I do, believe it or not, Brad, still have every intention of watching PsychOdyssey. But I was trying to like the games that I picked tonight. I was trying to come at from different angles. And Alan Wake, I find to be incredibly interesting because ultimately it ended up succeeding. And I think, obviously, Remedy is known for Max Payne. Like, that was kind of that's what they were largely known for prior to Alan Wake. And then, I think as a studio, for a long time they were kind of the studio, like they made Max Payne 1 and 2, and then like what. I don't think people had a lot of faith in them. Like they would be excited if there was going to be a new Max Payne or whatever, but this is just the studio that makes Max Payne games now. And then they dropped Alan Wake, and it was well received against all odds. And then from that point forward, like the studio kind of like it was like they rebounded. They were suddenly they had new and exciting projects. They were working on Quantum Break and Control, and they just as a studio they just kind of reinvented themselves and came back from the brink. So to see how Alan Wake was kind of instrumental in like getting that studio back on track after years of just being like a burden, I think in a lot of ways on the studio would be really, really fascinating. And now, not only that, but like Alan Wake 2 is coming out hopefully this year, and it's shifting genres. I would love to see. I don't know how much you said. Like with PsychOdyssey, they talk about Psychonauts 1 a little bit too, right? It's mostly focused on 2, but there are some points where they're talking about 1. I'd kind of like to see the reverse here and see how like the experience working on Alan Wake 1 ultimately drove them to change things and reinvent with Alan Wake 2. Obviously, we haven't seen how that has played out yet, but
also don't forget American Nightmare. Like that should be several chapters to discuss.
I always kind of forget about American Nightmare because I didn't ultimately like that experience nearly as much as the
understandable,
base game.
But like number one, it is canon to Alan Wake, and number two, they invented an excellent villain, like one that everyone still talks about.
Yeah,
sure, but I think it's kind of interesting too because Alan Wake wasn't like some overnight success. I feel like there was a real question as to like, was this game even successful or not?
Well, it doesn't help that the game released on the same day as Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah,
it did.
Same
fucking day.
Mistake.
Like 30 minutes of that documentary needs to be devoted to just talking about the aftermath of the release date.
Every documentary here should probably have a whole episode talking about how they decide on their release dates, because I think that's what we all want to know, because like sometimes they make bad decisions.
Much more complicated than you think.
I know. And of course it is. But anyways, Alan Wake, I would be fascinated to take a really, really deep dive into Alan Wake and see how it helped get Remedy as a studio kind of back on track against all odds. All right.
Well, we can go right into my number 2. We shouldn't dilly dally. We shouldn't dilly dally. I'll say this: this is one that feels like the impossible. It was a bit of a miracle. Like, why did this game get greenlit? Why did it came out and it surprised everyone? And that's Metroid Prime, which is such a fascinating project because this is Nintendo, one of their first party franchises. Metroid, which wasn't like super popular in Japan, but it was like well respected. Super Metroid was already, one of the greatest games of all time, right? And they went a whole generation with no Metroid. And then they decide to like, I don't know, we're going to let this random studio that no one's ever heard of in Texas, who's never shipped a game. They worked on a game and it got canceled. We're just going to give them Metroid and let them turn it into a first-person shooter. And by the way, it's fucking incredible. Like, what the hell happened there, right? What were I want to see the conversations happening at Nintendo when that decision was made, because
I want to know if there were other studios who were pitching ideas and they were just going to pick the one that they thought had the most potential. Because I feel like that's got to be how this happened, right?
again, it's this thing where there's never enough like information out there, especially with stuff like Nintendo stuff, right? And like how it's the conversations, right? And it's the yeah, first person shooter, that sounds fine, right? People like those. Halo, right? Like like I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I love Metroid Prime. It seemed like the impossible at the time. It seemed like the impossible. Like I remember, reading about this shit in magazines, and it just seemed crazy, right? But it comes out, and I think it was more of a like Metroid game. Like people were expecting more first person shooter, but it was like,
They're
no,
expecting more Halo,
this
less Metroid.
this is really is Metroid in first person, and they nailed it from like the look, from the feel to like the design, the atmosphere. It's all there. They fucking nailed it. It's impossible. The first game for this studio that again no one had ever heard of. Like,
You
how do you
know,
do that?
so
How do you farm? Like, they must have been like, we're gonna try this, and if this doesn't work out, that's it for Metroid. And like
right.
I think that's happened with Nintendo franchises. I think it's happening right now with Advance Wars, where they let a Western indie dev like remake a couple of games in the series and just to see how it is, because Japan just doesn't care about the series. And Metroid has always been like that with Japan. Did you know that new Switch, by the way, like the Switch, one of the most successful systems in Japan of all time? Like, it's crazy, right? Like, single-handedly, like Japanese sales can like really, like Splatoon, for example, sells like insane in Japan. They're not even releasing this remake in Japan. This
The
Advance
Metroid
Wars
remake?
remake.
Oh,
It's
the
not
advanced one.
no. The Advance Wars remake's not even coming out in Japan. And I feel like Metroid was one of those franchises that just Japanese people didn't care about. And I feel like if the Japanese audience doesn't care about it, kind of Nintendo doesn't really care as much, it seems like.
I mean,
And I feel like
you can
that's
see how
probably
that
how they
makes sense.
I feel like that's how they got here. Or maybe they really were chasing like, the Halo money, or but again, the game they were making was nothing like a first person. It was not, whatever
You
first
know,
person shooters were hot at the time when development started. It was nothing like that. So I don't even know.
in a lot of cases, games get greenlit because of the development of like a vertical slice demo, right? Just like a tech demo that's pitched to a studio is like, this is just kind of a vertical slice idea of what we're going for, and this may not be enough to fill an entire like huge docuseries, but like you could probably make it a documentary alone on, assuming this is how Metroid Prime was pitched to Nintendo. Like if Retro developed a vertical slice of what they were going for with Metroid Prime in order to pitch to Nintendo, like I would watch an entire documentary about the decisions that went into that pitch, that tech demo, because it's highly likely that that's ultimately what ended up landing them the gig, and that would be fascinating.
You want to see very tense and interesting conversations about demos and stuff? I
Watch
have a recommendation
PsychOdyssey.
for you. Anyways, yeah, that's it. Metroid Prime. I mean, I feel like the game itself like kind of explains. Yeah, that would be really fascinating, right? Um, I'm sure there's a crazy story there, and I'd love to have seen it. Anyways,
Yeah.
that's my number 2.
All right, Crispy, number 2.
Oh boy. So in keeping with the theme of
Corporate greed.
the negativity of corporate culture, corporate greed, and failure and avarice, I cannot wait for the inevitable documentary about Disco Elysium.
Oh fuck!
Especially with all the drama that's going on right now. My God.
It like recently, like this has been going on, like new stuff has been developing as late as like March 23rd, I think is the last update I see here.
Mhm.
Um, so
I forget that there's all this drama.
so without getting into like the whole saga of it, because I don't even know all the details. It is confusing. But Zaum, I believe is their name. The studio which created Disco Elysium was originally started as like a creative, like artistic collective of like leftist artists who were doing like all kinds of different shit, and they a couple of the people in that group this group played D&D, and a couple of them like actually built this whole campaign setting, this whole world, which they called Elysium. And they all kind of worked on different projects and different pieces of art that involved in Elysium or took place in Elysium, and supposedly this world is complete, like its entire history is mapped out from like prehistoric age up through like postmodernism basically. And the vertical slice that we see of it in Disco Elysium is just kind of like a little tiny bit towards the newer end of the spectrum, but there's this whole culture and this whole like kind of fiction that they've built around this world that is, honestly, the more you dig into it, the more kind of like, I mean, just like absolutely gonzo and like really cool and really like melancholic and emotional and like just kind of fucking vibey it all is. It's like this whole world is kind of like built on these like just little islands of creation that they call the isolas, that are separated by like this fog cloud of like literal like entropy of non-existence and like completely static state. It is fucking strange. Like it is way stranger than it needed to be for the story that they were telling in the video game Disco Elysium. You know what I mean? But that is the charm of the game. The game is so creative, it's so honest, it's so like sincere and artful, and has a lot of things to say about a lot of different topics, and is very clearly written by people who do not think very highly of capitalism or hierarchical government structures or a lot of things that are kind of considered, base assumptions in Western culture, right? Fantastic game, can't recommend it enough. Definitely a top 10 of all time.
That year.
Definitely like a top 10 of your life kind of game.
There'll never be another one like it, probably.
And because the drama surrounding the creation of the game and its post-release life and the sort of metamorphosis of Zaum studio is almost completely commensurate with like the big ideas of the game itself. Like I said, the game is written by a bunch of like leftists who are very like anti-corporatist, anti-capitalists, and like the studio was built in the original in its original iteration as like kind of a collective co-op, and then slowly evolved into this corporation that employs like 100 different designers and artists, and they opened an office in the UK and all this stuff. And then last year there was legal trouble where we found out that like the creative head, like the creative leads, the two creative leads of the game and one of the executive producers were all kind of like just cut out, like were ousted from the company. The people who were part of the original collective that created this game and created the world of Elysium were cut off. And one of the aggrieved parties, the executive producer, whose name was Kender, actually turned around and sued the company and was making all kinds of like really bold, out there claims. Not like out there, but like upfront claims. Was not mincing his words at all. Said that like what Zaum had done to them and had done in like securing the rights to the game was a crime, that they had looted from them, that they were stealing money from them and stealing money from the employees, and that this was all complete like Machiavellian scheme by the CEO of the company, and huge fucking shitstorm. And so little was known about like the actual culture of this company or the background of Elysium and all that stuff before this came out. And it's only once this information came to light that we started learning more about like the kind of scope of like the artistry and the creativity behind the game. And the sort of ambitions that the original creative team originally had for sequels to the game. They wanted to do a whole bunch of different projects set in this world, and now it's like that might be completely corrupted. As of the end of last year, in December, Kender dropped the lawsuit, and there was a statement issued by Zaum saying, like, he realized that this was a frivolous lawsuit, that he was incorrect, that we came to an agreement, blah blah blah, and then the other two guys who were wrapped up in this whole drama were releasing their own statements saying like, no, that's not what happened. These guys are lying. Like basically these people keep like clashing and pulling back and then claiming victory. Each one of them.
Right.
Even like when the judge is ordering Kendra was ordered to pay the CEO's legal fees and like this kind of fight of statements keep going back and forth through March. There was like 3 different press releases, and each one of them was met by like more criticism of like accusations of like, no, that is not what's happening. This is all lies. And like I can't even lay into like how intricate this web of like misinformation is, like how much information is being thrown out about the situation and yet how opaque it is. You know what I mean? It is insane, and it's a huge fucking tragedy because it looks like we may never get the original artist's vision for a sequel for this game. We may never get they may never have access to those rights again. We may never see anything.
Dude, I would love to see this
body
documentary. I would love to see this documentary made in like the style of Disco Elysium, right? Like,
yeah, and I mean it is absolute dramatic irony that like this specific situation would be happening to this specific game. You know, like this is it's almost surreal. And I am as much as I've been following it and as much as I'm a fan of the game, like it is still so far over my head. I barely understand the players involved or like even what the fuck is happening at any given moment. But like it is there's a tone to the drama that is kind of not all that common in Western business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And
that
would be a dark rabbit hole to go down, but it'd be fascinating to watch for sure.
And I only say Western business because I have no idea. Like, I mean, I have no idea if that would be.
That's what you're familiar with.
Business, yeah, but it's just wild. It's just it's. God, it couldn't God. That game is so special. The game is so special.
It is once in a lifetime kind of game for sure.
And for this to be happening is. I mean,
it's tragic. It's
radicalizing. You know, it's like it's like I want to do something
perfect.
I want to throw a brick through a window about it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Damn. Okay. Don't throw a brick through a window. Instead, Chris Davis, are you back? Are you good?
Yes, I'm good. Sorry, there was some neighbor drama.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah. All right. As tempted as I am to ask you about that, we need to move on. What is your second pick for the night?
My second pick for the night. So here's the thing.
I have a question, Chris Davis. He's always has a thing.
My number one pick. I'm fairly certain people are going to talk about it, so I want to talk about this one first because I think it's more interesting.
Okay.
I would like to see a lengthy documentary series about the development of Lionhead's Fable 2 and 3.
I don't even know. I didn't even think about Lionhead when I was thinking about this. That would be good.
Fable is one of those Xbox franchises that was hyped up so much.
Fable 2 and 3. Why not Fable 1? Like they're all it's all fucking weird.
Fable 1's the game that like taught us not to trust.
Yeah. That is true.
Yeah. But Fable 2 is the game that Molyneux was coming out and saying, oh, well, we weren't able to do this in 1, but we can do all this and so much more in 2, which was giving all of the development team just nightmares trying to figure out how the fuck to implement. I granted my argument isn't as strong as I'd had for Assassin's Creed 3 because it's been so much longer since I played Fable 2 or 3 at this point. But I remember of what I played of those 2 games, like just kind of being fascinated about what they built in there, as well as so much that was promised that didn't end up being in there.
Dude, I'm picturing a documentary where it's like intimate one-on-one interviews with Peter Molyneux, right? And he's talking about his vision and like how much he respects the team and how much he wishes like he had all these like wonderful ideas and whatnot. And then like hard cuts to like interviews with developers just being like, man, fuck Peter Molyneux.
No. Here's what you do: is that you do that, but the entire thing is narrated by Ron Howard, and every single time Molyneux makes a promise, he says Ron Howard comes and says, "No, that never happened."
Yeah, that would work. There'd be a yeah.
That documentary would just be a bunch of Frenchmen frustratedly smoking cigarettes.
Just stressing out over this code that they have to write now because they need to figure out how to code an acorn to grow procedurally over the course of 20 years. Like
I'd like
it's
to
just
see the documentary series about the new Fable, because what the fuck? That's obviously in some sort of development.
What does Fable look like without Peter Molyneux? I don't know. It's fascinating. Persuade.
It looks like a Western RPG, is what it does.
Per Persuade in our chat, I would like to see a documentary focused on the development of the farting mechanic in Fable 2.
The farting mechanic, the fucking gargoyles, the combat system, which was so kind of obtuse in so many ways.
We couldn't make the acorn thing work, but we got this farting mechanic.
Yeah, you can't die in Fable. You get scars.
Yeah, you get scars.
You just fart.
And in that regard, like that specific thing, it feels like a punishment. Like if you're not good enough, that visually reflects on your character, and that just feels
like Peter Molyneux.
I don't know.
No, I mean, I think you're right. Any sort of like Peter Molyneux project would probably be pretty interesting.
Do a documentary. What was the game where you had to like get to the center of the universe or something? And
the cube, the center of the
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
Yeah, do a documentary about that.
Yeah,
that would.
Dude, I mean, like, there's an interview with that kid, and there's no story. There's no story there. That kid told it in 2 paragraphs, and that's it.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Like,
damn.
This just came out at This came out what 2010, I think. Fable 2. No, it was 08. It was 08. So that was like the brand.
Go farther back, man. I want to see. You know what? Fuck it. Just make a documentary about Fable as a series. I want to see 1, 2, and 3. I want to see the trajectory of that series because damn.
And then don't forget you got to talk about the journey. You got to mention that.
No, okay.
You got to spend 20 minutes on that just to figure out. Okay, we're being told to make a Fable game for the Kinect. What do we do?
Right, and then while you're in the neighborhood, you can talk a little bit about Gears of War and like how that used to be like a horror game, and then they turned it into a sci-fi shooter kind of thing.
Yeah. Maybe even throw in a little Mario Brothers, you know?
Like, I mean, Fable 3 in and of itself, it needs its own separate documentary because, like, that game is half of an interesting, like, course correction from Fable 2, and then the rest of it is just, like, they cut out another entire game's worth of stuff.
I do feel like that Fable as a series is like 3 instances of 3 games that ended up coming out, all 3 of which feel kind of incomplete in some way, shape, or form. It's weird. So yeah, I would love to see how all of that transpired. For sure. And I would want, of all the things we've talked about tonight, maybe most with Fable, I would want it to be as fucking candid as possible. Like, I want to see all of it.
Every single interview needs to be like at a bar, just like with a gigantic bottle of whiskey just right on the table, so the developers can really let loose and talk about all the shit that
really
really
relive it.
We need that avant-garde fly on the wall documentary, and the gaming industry needs its gimme shelter. You know, gotta have it.
Well, we need a glass door for video game stories is what we need.
What was the Beatles documentary about the making of was it Abbey Road? What was it came out a couple of years ago?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't remember what it was called.
I've seen that, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, no, I mean it's not that old.
Get Back, the Beatles Get Back, the one that's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, which I heard was like extraordinary, and then I heard someone said that PsychOdyssey is better than that.
Dang.
Damn.
was,
Okay.
Speaking of, if you've never seen it, Gimme Shelter is a really good documentary.
All
It's
right.
about the Rolling Stones.
I was gonna say
Number two. My number 2 pick. Are we ready? We good?
Yeah.
All right.
Go
So
for
this one is a bit of kind of an unknown at the moment, but I think that's part of the intrigue, especially because we don't know how it's turned out yet. But I want to see a documentary about the development of the Silent Hill 2 reboot. Not only from a perspective of how do you not only remake a classic, but remake a classic from like giving a classic like it's kind of the Metroid Prime situation. We obviously don't know if it's proven to be that successful, obviously, but like you're handing a game, not just a franchise, but a game with a very storied history to a completely different, completely third party, and have it in saying, "Hey, rebuild this from the ground up and make it your own." So I want to know one how a team, just any team, Bloober or not, like, would approach that. But on the other hand, on the other side of this, you're also we finally had that moment where Konami kind of revealed themselves as like, we are back in the business of making video games and we are going fucking all in on Silent Hill, which is a day a lot of us thought would never come. And
or kind of feared at some point.
yeah, but like at the crux of this whole reboot of Silent Hill as a franchise and Konami as a video game developer is this reboot or remake of Silent Hill 2, one of my favorite games of all time. If you ask fans of horror games in general, Silent Hill 2 is almost always like at the top of people's lists in terms of like best horror games ever made, and it's just like this could go shockingly well or it could all come off the rails and we just don't know yet. So like, especially coming from the perspective of like talking about PsychOdyssey, it's like you had a documentary crew following this team making this game from the day one, not knowing what the outcome was going to be. I think Silent Hill 2 reboot, or I keep saying reboot when it's a remake, Silent Hill 2 remake would be a fascinating project to follow from start to finish, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And then like dedicate the last episode, the last chunk of the documentary to postmortem and being like, okay, now we know how it turned out, so let's talk about it. Because I feel like the discussions there will, because there's going to be regrets, there's going to be things that are like, oh, thank God we made that decision instead of doing this, or like, man, we were really close to doing this and I think that would have pissed off a lot of people. You know, like those kinds of conversations I think would be fascinating, absolutely fascinating to see play out. Obviously, I'm hoping that it turns out to be a success.
Also, I would love to see like what the original like Silent Hill creators think about like the project. But
yeah, no, that would be great.
Because Masahiro Ito didn't he like randomly on Twitter just was saying he wished he never created Pyramid Head, and
Yeah.
I think it's because of how he became like this. I mean, people just assume that he's probably not happy with that he sort of became this weird unofficial mascot of the series, but
like he was the character of Pyramid Head was never designed to become this like this thing that had cameos and like anything
DLC
Hill
for
related for the
half a
rest.
dozen other games.
Yeah. I think the Pyramid Head thing really fell apart when it appeared. Whichever one came first, when he appeared in Silent Hill Homecoming, or when he appeared in that Silent Hill movie, the first Silent Hill movie. I think he was in both Silent Hill movies. I think that's when it was like, you ruined it. You fucking ruined it. He should have. It should have been in Silent Hill 2, and it should have. That's what made Silent Hill 2 kind of special. So I don't know, but like, yeah, like there's lots of discussions there that would be fascinating, especially bringing in a combination of like the new team and the original team, and see how they reacted to it and that kind of thing. Dude, it's fascinating. It's fucking
They've never made a
fascinating.
game with combat, right?
I mean, here's the good thing.
They're gonna try to turn Pyramid Head into a Mr. X, and they're just not.
Here's the good thing. The beautiful thing about the Silent Hill 2 remake is because you can't ruin the combat. It's already ruined. So like, I mean, it was already bad. It was already bad.
Silent Hill did not get amazing reviews when it came out. I really don't think so. And like the combat was kind of shit on back then, right? And I think maybe they got a pass back then for like atmosphere because it felt like something new and unique and there wasn't much like Silent Hill, but you don't if you bring it back and like a core mechanic is just bad, I don't think people are going to let it slide anymore. I just don't. I don't know.
I mean, you might be right, but like
Make
I
of
will
it
say
what you
this,
will, but Silent
still
Hill on the PlayStation 1 has a 86 on Metacritic.
that's not what about Silent Hill 2? But I still
I mean, it wasn't getting like
I,
Resident Evil scores, I don't think, because of
I still hold, and
complaints or
I'm not
whatever.
alone in this. A lot of people who consider themselves like big
89.
horror game fans consider, regardless of the critical reception, Silent Hill 2 to be one of the best games ever made. Period. Not even just best horror games, like best games. It's in my top 5 favorite games of all time, and none of that has to do with combat. And that's all I'm saying. Is like if it comes out again and it doesn't have better combat, sure, I'll be a little disappointed. But it's not why I'm playing. That's not why I'm excited for this remake or whatever. So I'm just saying, a documentary, regardless of how it turns out, the game itself turns out. I think this in particular would make a fascinating
I
documentary
want to
from
hear the
several angles.
conversations of like, all the people at the studio begging for them to change like the studio's name, because I'm sure that happened. That conversation probably happens once a month there, right? Why
You
are we
really don't.
called Bloober? We make all these horror games and we're called Bloober. It's got to be.
I think you're probably the only one who thinks about that nearly that much.
No, there's no
All right.
fucking way.
Okay. Final round.
It sounds like a balloon company.
It does. Final round. Top picks for the night. Keeping time in mind. Brad, what is your final choice?
Well, come on, this is obvious, right? It's
Breath of the
It's
Wild.
scale bound. Scale bound.
Oh, Scalebound.
Yeah, like
I did not think about that.
yeah, yeah. The reason I got an Xbox One, right? Like the
Oh my
laughable
god.
Xbox One, one of the the stinkers of all consoles, right? The Xbox One finally had a reason to pick it up, and it was a game that ended up getting canceled. The biggest project Platinum has ever worked on. The next game directed by Hideki Kamiya, and it was going to be you're going to have your own dragon, and you're going to be able to fly the dragon around. And it was a big, huge RPG with floating islands and stuff, a little bit like maybe Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know. Who knows what it was going to be, but I was excited about it.
And it didn't end up
And
coming
people were
together.
excited. It didn't come together. It got canceled, and you always people still argue about who was at fault or whatever, right? Fucking Microsoft stupid, idiots, they cancel this and they dump another year's worth of money into Crackdown 3 and that comes out and it's just a fart, it's like yeah, I mean, I just want to see it. It's like I was super excited about that game obviously, and I don't know, I always thought it looked really cool. It had kind of a dumb main character, but it was Platinum Games, right? And I feel like there was so much you know, I feel like Platinum is back to doing relatively safe kind of action games, the kind of games that they're good at making and are people like, they review well, but it's still like they're not,
They're
you
still
know,
living in the shadow of Scale. Like that project is gonna haunt. It's gonna stay with them for a long time.
and you see remnants of it, right? Like obviously some of that Scalebound stuff made its way into Bayonetta 3 and it was really cool there, but they're just sort of like it's just sort of a fraction of what could have been. And you know God, there's just so much back and forth, so much bickering, the
hmm
chaos on Twitter with like Kamiya and is Phil Spencer a hack? Of course he is, but we don't have to get into that now. When is he gonna get fired, by the way?
Hmm.
uh, um,
Who
but yeah, I
knows?
don't know. It was canceled in a time when you could argue they still need something like a Scalebound. In a time when they just had just really kind of boring, uneventful first party, and I don't know. it's unfortunate, and I want to see it all. I'd watch the whole documentary series from the idea to the cancellation because
Man,
there's probably a lot of heartbreak, a lot of tears, and a lot of like screaming. And I mean, I just can't think of a project more that I just want to know more about than this one, because God,
sometimes
sometimes failure is more interesting than the success stories, right? Even the miracles. I want to know how everything fell apart. And
sometimes I forget that I went to a PAX panel about Scalebound, and Hideki Kamiya was there, and he signed a poster. Did I give that poster to you, Brad?
yes.
You still
Yeah.
have it? You
Yeah,
still have it
you all
framed somewhere?
they also showed footage at that PAX
Yeah,
panel that you described to me. That footage doesn't exist anywhere.
yeah. They never
It
released it.
doesn't exist. No, yeah, they never
It, ex-
released it. No one
it
filmed it.
exists. It exists rent free in my mind.
It doesn't
None of you
exist, and
can.
you probably already forgot about it
Oh,
because
I've long
you
since
don't you
forgotten
don't
it.
yeah you were never gonna play this
It's gone.
Japanese game.
It's gone. Oh,
So
fuck you! You had to find. You had to find it.
yeah,
Find a way
so
to come back to that.
that's my number one. Maybe the tell all will come out one day, but probably not. Fuck.
I think they've moved on. I think the ship has sailed on that one. I don't know if we're ever going to circle back. Maybe NoClip will one day
I mean,
go
that's
and do
the thing
something about
about
it.
PsychOdyssey, right? Nothing like this will ever happen again, even from them, because they are now owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft is not going to let them do, even though, like, people asked him, Schaefer, and it's like a very uneasy answer, like, oh, and he's like, yeah, there's still employees here. They're still going to keep doing their thing, but there's no fucking way that things are going to keep going as they've been going. Even things like Amnesia Fortnite, which was like people pitching ideas for a game jam, like those were their projects. They got to keep those ideas. They had conversations during Psych Odyssey with Microsoft of like Microsoft execs coming into Double Fine saying, "Hey, like this moonlighting things, y'all, this we're gonna have to talk about this because you know things that get developed here as part of Microsoft are owned by Microsoft. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna next go around, next Amnesia Fortnite, we're gonna have to hash this out because it can't really go the way it did in the past. And it's like, again, I don't think we're ever gonna see something like Psych Odyssey ever again, and it's really sad.
Yeah.
So watch it. But yeah,
Maybe you should talk to Zero Skies in Discord, Brad. He was at the panel as well, and maybe he has a better memory than I do, so you can like pick
yeah,
his
maybe
brain
he
for
does. I mean, he
details.
plays Japanese games, right?
Maybe maybe he can paint you a picture that I can never paint. All right, Crispy, what's your final pick for the night?
My third game for the night, I'm actually picking a browser-based community game.
RuneScape.
No. No. What?
I
No.
don't know. Just guessing.
So for my third game, I would love to see a documentary about Blaseball.
What?
Mostly just so I can fucking
What the
wrap my
fuck
head
now
is
you're
around
gonna
it.
have to explain Blaseball to
Yes.
Nick.
Explain
Yeah,
yourself.
Blaseball is okay, so very basically it is hourly baseball fantasy that's played out over a 100-hour season every week. And then on the weekend they do postseason, so like, the equivalent to the World Series. It's a fantasy league. It's not like you create your own team. You register as a fan of like these 24 different pre-created teams that are split into two leagues, the mild league and the wild league, and then two divisions within each. There's mild league high, mild league low, wild league high, and wild league low.
This is how I know Nick doesn't listen to good game podcasts because he would know
He's
about
never heard of
Blaseball if he did.
Blaseball. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nick, like the whole thing with Blaseball is that it's not.
Explain this to Nick.
It kind of but Nick, it kind of resembles baseball except way crazier, way weirder. All sorts of different conditions and like weird things can happen that affect the outcome of games. The outcome of games is normally determined by like comparing team scores and some sort of calculation that takes place, but like the stats that like the individual players on each team are tracked on are things like their base thirst or their anti-capitalism or their buoyancy, and then those translate to how well they are at like pitching or base running or hitting, and then like things can happen during games that like do different stuff. Like umpires can sometimes go rogue and just like incinerate players, and then that player's dead forever. Like there's a blood rain that can come and like rain on the game, and if that happens, then players can like siphon stats from each other. Like they can steal the opponent's stats. I
Brad,
mean,
just so
there's
you know,
all
you
kinds
can
of
see
weird
shit
shit.
right now. You know.
There's all kinds of weird, wild shit. Like there's a peanut god called the Shelled One that shows up or did show up for a few seasons and like cause all kinds of mayhem. Like
I love that. That's great.
if people were like fans of players that didn't have the word peanut in their name, the Shelled One would get really angry and then shell those players, like put them in giant peanut shells so they couldn't play. I mean, like the whole point of the league, like the continuous competition of the league, is that eventually teams are supposed to be able to ascend into a new league, which would be Blaseball 2. But it's only happened once, as far as I know. I think it's only happened one team ascended and then descended back down
Okay,
into.
so this is fascinating. How does this become a documentary?
Because I don't know, like I like the creative process behind it. I want to see like who the fuck was sitting around going like, yeah, that's it. Like that's what we'll do. And I'm honestly, I want this documentary to be 15 minutes long, and I want it to mostly just be explain Blaseball to me. Like, you know what I'm saying? But I think I think if I think it's worth highlighting because it's a really fun creative idea that also just like isn't, you know, a commercial product for sale.
There
It's
we
just
go.
like something
Yeah,
someone
for
put
sure.
out that you can go play and have fun with and
It's a
try to
corner of
wrap
the
your head
gaming
around.
world that's not a commercial
Right.
product, which is
It was
obviously
definitely
very rare.
like a moment in time for like a very like small group of
It,
people who were
yeah.
intensely invested, and I feel
And
like
it was
a
happening during
docu-series
like
would be
it
the
hit
perfect way to
beta.
capture all that, you know.
Like it hit beta in 2020. So like it had some momentum going because there was a lot of people just like following that, and it was kind of, yeah, like Brad's saying, it was kind of the thing of the moment for a little while. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind hearing about it. I think it sounds pretty neat.
It'd also be would it would be cool to see like how much the creators, I mean, that's the thing, who was even really quote unquote working on this, were steering the narrative versus like listening to the community and letting them kind of like steer the narrative
And there is a
based on
little
like
bit
the
of a
conversations they were having about the game.
back and forth there too,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I think it would be pretty low stakes, honestly, but I think it would be fun.
Sure, that'd be a good watch. Crispy just posted the link to Blaseball in chat. That's pretty good. Check it out. All right, Chris Davis, final pick. The one that is this the one that you said is not as interesting as your last pick?
See, now I've changed my mind because I was expecting
Oh.
Crispy to pick Cyberpunk 2077.
No, I mean,
Because he's playing it right now, and that game
it's a good game, but I do think that's another example of like a studio believing its own bullshit a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That sounds about right. Yeah. So
Witcher 3 definitely went to CDPR's heads, and
I was thinking a lot about Witcher 3 as well. Yeah. Just
but
really
no,
it'd just be a lot of footage of people crunching and unhappy, probably.
Yeah, it would just be, yeah, that story is just a bunch of people work to make their bosses really rich.
Okay, I'm split. This is so tough for me because these are both games that neither Nick nor Nick would not pick. So
are you picking
a no
Cyberpunk?
Nick pick?
I'm confused.
Not Cyberpunk?
No, it's not going to be Cyberpunk. I've decided that's going to be an honorable mention.
So he just threw out an honorable mention in the middle of our list. Okay.
Oh,
Yes,
he
I did.
cheated! He cheated!
I did. I'm going to continue to cheat.
Tar and feather him.
Either BioShock Infinite.
Stop it! What are you doing?
You're pulling a. Okay, you can't. No, this or shit doesn't work, Chris Davis. Pick one.
No, wait. Let him finish.
Let him cook.
Or EVE Online.
Oh.
I'm going with EVE Online. EVE Online, one of the oldest MMOs in existence, predating World of Warcraft. This this long
The
running
EverQuest days.
like I mean
Ultima
EverQuest, like
Online?
how many of the kids still remember EverQuest? Crispy.
The Dark Ages of Camelot.
Like Ultima and RuneScape and all of fucking those, like
Back when games used to be hard and punishing.
oh man, like there's old man yells at cloud. But like I am so interested and terrified by Eve at the same time because I love the idea of a persistent online massive galactic space experience done by millions of players. How they have
They're
these
working on one, which
economies
would be a
and player created
great
wars in which the developers don't shape gameplay, the players do, and the developers just kind of have to react. Hearing all these stories about these player organized wars against one another that lead into battles with thousands upon thousands of ships that make the servers function at frames per minute, not frames per second.
Wait a second. Sorry.
Are you looking up screenshots of EVE Online?
No. I'm just like, what the fuck are y'all doing? What's that game that everyone here is like? That everyone here is they've been developing for like
Citizen?
like what the
Star
nobody
Citizen.
said Star Citizen?
No one says
I mean,
Star
I get.
Citizen.
I like
Star
is there a
Citizen
story-
is a fucking scheme
That
designed to
seems
steal
way- yeah,
monies
it
from people.
Makes it a prime candidate for a documentary.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's
but-
not even
but-
an interesting one. It's like, yeah, I don't know.
Star Citizen doesn't need a documentary. It needs a public trial. It needs to all come out in court is what Star Citizen needs.
There is a good documentary about Star Citizen somewhere, but also if you want to find it, you can just go watch the Folding Ideas documentary about NFTs, and it's basically the same shit. Like,
Oh my god! I was about to say like defenders of Star Citizen sound like crypto bros. You know,
yeah,
it's kind of
it
weird.
is. It is like the model is eerily similar.
Yeah, it'll come out one day and it'll be a full ass product. It'll be the most amazing thing in the world. Yeah, but it's been in development for 10 years. You still haven't put out the single player experience that you put teasers with prominent actors for back in 2015.
Okay,
No,
I didn't mean to.
you're working on it, man.
Julian
I didn't mean
Anderson.
I didn't mean to derail
Mark
this too
Hamill
much. Get back to Eve
Yeah, did he
Online.
pick a game? EVE
or-
Online. I mean, the stories about like Eve are like the part that people know, and the part that's like stuff that's really interesting, and how
Yeah.
like big huge battles like have an effect on like the entire economy of Iceland. You know, it's crazy for sure.
Like it's absolutely insane. And they have done such an interesting job of supporting this game and trying their best to find ways to expand upon it and ultimately failing but still continuing on. Like Dust 514, their free-to-play first-person shooter that was set in the Eve universe that ended up just being completely abandoned in a way I would liken to that Cliff Bleszinski game. What was it called?
Lawbreakers.
Lawbreakers, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you hear so many fascinating stories about this franchise, but you're hearing fascinating stories about the community playing this game, not the developer. And
that's a good point.
that's what I kind of want to know. I want to know what's up with the developers, how have they supported this game for over 20 years, and are they going to continue on? Like, is this game in perpetuity? Are we eventually going to get EVE Online 2? Like, what is the future of CCP games?
There is something innately compelling about the sort of people that like fantasize about going into space and flying around in spaceships, but like want to just use that as a platform for like mercantile commerce. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like,
That's intense. Yeah, for sure.
it's
mean,
intense.
Takes a special kind of person to like.
We'll go
commit
to
it.
other planets and sell them sprockets and bolts.
It's just absolutely
Yeah.
fascinating to me. There's actually a pair of books called Empires of Eve out there that I've been meaning to buy, and they're all about the player wars between the various factions and like how they started, why they started, and what happened. I really need to pick those up. In fact, I'm on Amazon right now eyeballing the first volume.
You should read those before you read.
Are they higher or lower on your list than Masters of Doom?
Yeah, oh man, Chris Davis, you just walked right into that. I was like, why do you even have to mention books and the fact that you're adding them to your cart?
Hey, just because I buy a book doesn't mean I actually read it is the problem.
Hell yeah, brother.
Dude, I've gone to Barnes Noble like 4 times over the past like 6 months and bought books every time, and I'm still reading books.
Go to Barnes and Noble.
I'm still reading a book that I bought like 9 months ago. So you know, it's
you're spending money. You're spending money on the fantasy that you're a person who would sit down and read.
Exactly.
Yes.
Dude, I'm proud of myself when I read a chapter a night, and that doesn't happen very often.
I'm spending money on the idea that I have time for my imagination to embrace words on a page, and like no, my imagination.
Well, there are audiobooks. I mean, you could. Are y'all? You know.
What's an audiobook?
All right. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay. My final pick for the night might be. I don't know if this is interesting or not interesting. I don't know. Well, you be the judge, I guess. But and here's the thing about my pick. You're probably going to say not. There's actually been there's been actually a lot of like kind of behind the scenes developer interviews, all kinds of stuff.
Onimusha 4.
No. It's Naughty Dog.
Naughty Dog?
I specifically would like a documentary about. I would specifically like a documentary about the development of The Last of Us 2.
Uncharted 3.
But I'm saying The Last of Us 2 for a number of reasons. One, because on top of the fact, like there has been a lot of between from podcasts to developer developer vlogs and whatnot to, you know, even the behind the scenes shit they showed when they were for the show on HBO. Like there's been just so much stuff to like kind of talk about, like the making of The Last of Us, but here's the thing, I've eaten it all up. I love every second of listening to them talk about that building that world across multiple mediums. Here's the thing, I would specifically like to watch a documentary about The Last of Us 2 as more of a kind of like massive postmortem, because it's a very divisive game. And I would like to hear, we hear so many people talking about they love The Last of Us 2 or they hate The Last of Us 2 for a number of reasons, but I don't think we've heard very candid reactions from the developers and why certain decisions were made. And I think that
Didn't they have their own podcast?
Yeah, but they talk a lot about the making of the game, but they never address they never directly address like kind of the fan reaction or the fan backlash or whatever. And and I think a documentary
because everything that comes out of them is just like, you know, Sony approved, like make the company look good. It's bullshit. Right. Y'all need to watch PsychOdyssey. I hate y'all.
Dude, fuck off. This is my time. Fuck off. Yes, we get it. PsychOdyssey is fantastic. Why do you think we let you inspire this entire bonus podcast here? Okay.
No, it wasn't even inspire. It was coerce us into doing it.
It was actually Pocop's ideas. So
Pocop's fault.
To Brad's point, I'm trying to kind of like, I'm using PsychOdyssey as kind of like my inspiration for why I would want to watch documentaries of that style. I think it would be fascinating. Not whether it's a post-mortem. I mean, obviously, we're not going to get a documentary following. There wasn't a camera crew following around Naughty Dog, analyzing every decision that was made during the process. That couldn't happen. I wish it would. I would take that any day of the week, because I would love to see them having meetings and discussions and creative debates about why certain design decisions made it into that game, why certain characters were a certain way, why they decided to make these really just fucking in-your-face, hard to accept choices about the way that story played out, which I think it would be I mean, wait, what?
Yeah, okay. I mean, yeah,
no,
right.
What are you talking about? Like, that's the like.
I mean, like I don't know. Like I feel like they made choices that were dramatic.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, you just
not like whoa, like They're like I don't know. It
Here,
like
I
nothing
said
that they did seemed like it was really outside the remit of
no.
somebody trying to tell a compelling story.
You know, you're absolutely right. I am completely on that side of the fence. I adore that game. I adore that story. I'm saying hard. I said hard to accept because that was the way a lot of people reacted to that game and kind of framed it. And they were like, I can't believe they did that. And you're right. It's just dramatic decisions that people didn't jive with for whatever reason. But like
A lot of culture war shit with that.
You're right. But like I think there is reasoning behind every decision that was made. I think there is logical reason behind every decision that was made, and I would just like to hear from the developer's mouth all the decisions and debates and conversations that went into those things, because I think a lot of those things are just completely, I don't want to say ignored, but like everybody takes everything at face value, and nobody thinks about, I say nobody, I know there's lots of people in our community, we've had like in-depth discussions about it. I'm not trying to like throw anybody under the bus here, but like a lot of people react to things and don't take a second to like stop and think, okay, why did they do this, or what was the benefit of doing this? And I would just like to hear it from the developers, and that's why I think it would be a fascinating documentary to hear it from them, be very candid about like why they made these creative decisions that I fully support, but like I want to hear it from them, because I think they are very good at explaining why these decisions were made. And I would like Brad said, I would like to see these kinds of things discussed and explained in a way that wasn't through Sony's filter. Because you're right, when they do talk about it, it is very much kind of like you got to be careful what you say, and you can't like let in a hint of negativity or even acknowledge the fact that some people find certain decisions very, very bad. But like, they know that shit, and I'm sure they're like eager to talk about it. Like I know these people probably go home and have conversations with their friends, or when they're at parties or whatever, just like in social situations, and they probably talk, like they probably just like say their mind, and like that's the kind of thing I would love to see in a documentary.
You're wrong there. Naughty Dog doesn't let them go home. They have to stay and work on the game.
And there's that. But yeah, I think The Last of Us 2 would make a fascinating documentary. I don't know. It's like, in the defense of The Last of Us Part 2, I think would be
I'd rather
amazing.
see Uncharted 4, like if they have footage of the part when Neil Druckmann kicks in the door and throws out Amy Hennig, like is there actual footage of him saying, "This is my game now. This is my game now. Look at The Last of Us reviews. Uncharted is mine now." Like from what I hear, that was an actual quote, and I bet they have footage.
All right.
I would say, Nick, to your sorry, Nick, I just wanted to mention that I'm all for the idea of a documentary on Part 2, but I think that is not something you can do without also doing the story of Factions 2. Because that is just... I mean, that seems like the second part of that story.
When he kicks in the door of the Factions developers and Neil Druckmann says, "Single player only. This is my game now. Get the fuck out. Maybe we'll do your shit later. And when y'all do, I'm going to make it a single player thing too." There's actually...
Here's the thing. Fuck you, Red. Here's the thing, because Davis, you're right. I would love to hear them talk about that, and especially why the decision was made to eventually exclude that from the game and turn it into its own product. And, I mean, I think we all know the answer to that too. It's money. But specifically the single player is why I want to hear about, because obviously it was a very, very, very divisive thing, which is what I was expecting necessarily going into The Last of Us Part 2. But I also think it's kind of what makes it special. So anyways, I've talked about it enough. We've made it to the end of our list. I want to roll through some community things here first, but y'all want to shout out any honorable mentions you didn't get a chance to talk about?
Every game I've ever played is what I want a docuseries on. 22 hours each one.
I feel like I was like almost sure Breath of the Wild was going to come up at some point, because
it was on my list. It was originally going to be brought up for sure.
Also, not just because of the obvious reasons, but also because I just feel like we don't really get many good looks at like Japanese development, I would love to get a better idea of how like Western development and Japanese development differ, and I just don't get many.
I'd like be a fly on the wall, in the development of a Refactor.
All you
how
had to do was
about
go into the Discord.
how about
Sure about that?
how about Star Wars 1313? I saw a demo of that game at the first E3 I ever went to, and then it died.
I mean, like,
Eh,
I think
know.
it would be interesting from the perspective of this is the last of that generation of Star Wars games.
there's probably
We
more.
can't go
There
into
are
detail on
more
each one.
interesting canceled Star Wars games to do documentaries.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
On my little honorable mention list, I have Kingdom Hearts because I want to see the
Oh.
conversations between Disney and Nomura and people going, The Office like cutaways to like after Nomura says something insane. The development of Doom 2016 and just how do you get from Doom 3 and all the canceled Dooms in between and end up in like 2016 and
I mean, we
the
kind
fact
of
that,
got
like,
that though. It just
no one
wasn't a
knew
long
that
series.
was like really good until like the day of release because they didn't send out early or
Chris Davis knew. Chris
early
Davis knew.
reviews.
I knew.
The zoom in on Chris Davis's face when he said "Doom is back, baby" at QuakeCon, despite having not
Doom is back,
finished
baby.
Doom, or no, he played Brutal Doom. But it's also stuff like Elden Ring, going.
Yeah.
Open world, and
I threw Portal on my list too.
I
Just
just have so many
because
things. Symphony of the Night, Shadow of the Colossus, GTA 3 for fuck's sake, right? There's a lot. Every game. I want to see this for every game, even games that I don't care about because this shit is.
Because now you're
good.
addicted to documentaries because of PsychOdyssey. Go watch it, bitches.
Not addicted to documentaries, about whatever. Just about like the creation of the thing that I love and I'm passionate about is super fascinating, y'all.
I was intentionally trivializing it to be funny, right?
Or because that's where it is in your head, but that's fine. What did the community say? I want to know I want to hear what they said on
Crispy, what are you trying to get out?
I'm sorry, this is a complete aside, but I think it's interesting and funny, and we haven't talked about it in a while. But when Brad was talking about the Doom, like when Chris came back and was like, "Doom's back, baby," right? Chris, you remember that was the fucking QuakeCon that I went with you. Remember that?
No, that was
Wasn't
you
it?
saw it the year before.
Oh, it was the year before. That's what it was. No, the thing I was remembering that I thought was a good story though was that trip that we took to QuakeCon on the way back. We'd been like driving all day and at the convention, and then like we were on 35 in downtown Austin and saw someone fucking wreck their car right in front of us. Like really scary.
Damn, I didn't know that happened.
You remember that, Chris?
I barely remember that, but it did happen.
Huh?
Like
you don't remember that?
I barely remember some of that. Like
you were driving and like we were in the front of a big pack of cars and there was one guy in front of us who was going faster and he hit the fucking barrier wall and like I think he like rolled up on his fucking side. Like it was bad.
God damn.
I don't know why I brought that up. I thought it was fun. And
one more on my short list was Demon Souls. Like how does From Software take kind of what some of the stuff they learned with like Kingsfield and like turn it into something that would become a phenomenon. I
can't wait to see the documentary about Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon, like that landmark game. I would love to see the development of that complete resurrection, that complete resurrection and turnaround of the Armored Core series.
The
like
next numbered game.
When people are like, "Oh my god, this is Armored Core's Monster Hunter World. It's popular now."
What did the community say?
Okay, here's what the community had to say.
Okay.
I want to say, Brad, you butt heads sometimes with Scud, but he said Metal Gear Solid 5. And he said,
"What does that have to do with Scud being a wiener?" I mean, we can both want to know about Metal Gear Solid 5, and he could still be a wiener.
I was just pointing out that I see y'all butt heads a lot in Discord, but y'all seem to be on the same wavelength, despite the fact that you.
Well, hey man, if Scud will actually watch a docuseries, then he's already got one up on y'all.
That's true. That's true. He says, high drama from the actors.
He's read Masters of Doom, I bet.
Let me get this out. He says, high drama from the actors, Hideo, Kojima, the tech development grind, the rushing from Konami, all that stuff. Ichi's Kid said, obviously, Half-Life 3.
Honestly, anything Valve related would be fascinating.
Yeah, he says, From procedural generated rebel missions to a version where Gordon wakes up with an aperture science arm that can change states of matter, to the canned episode 3 Dyson Sphere and Breen being turned into a grub. I don't know what that means. It's simply one of the industry's greatest failures that we've only gotten crumbs to. He's absolutely right, and I would love to see that kind of dovetail with a documentary about Half-Life Alyx and how that kind of somehow I think is the beginning of a new era of Half-Life, and how I think Alyx exists because of everything that happened behind the scenes involving Half-Life 3. Terrace Kasi says Wipeout. The entire concept of a futuristic racing game with amazing electronic soundtrack aimed at young clubbers who live that underground club culture, which eventually became a notable IP for Sony. Sure.
I mean, that's a 20-minute documentary in which half of it's just like, oh, that's
But it's a good
F-Zero.
20
That
minutes.
looks interesting. We can make that.
It'd be an interesting 20 minutes. The Drunken Merchant says Final Fantasy 15. I need to know if all the hate for Nomura is justified. I wonder how many arguments could have taken place and who is responsible for the broken, unorganized end product.
I mean, that's not a bad pick at all.
It's not a bad pick, but despite the fact that he calls it a broken, unorganized end product, that game still has like an 87 or something on Open Critic.
That has to include the whole like 13 verses,
Yeah.
all the original plans for it.
Yeah, that would make a really interesting documentary, how they went from calling it 13 verses to 15. Because I mean, that's out of all the Final Fantasies, that's one of the most unique stories. Drive-by Uppercut says Silent Hill 3 or Bloodborne. He says, would love to see the creative decisions and original story discussions for Silent Hill 3, what could have been, but also the insight into their process while giving credit to Team Silent members. I thought that was Team Silent. Maybe I'm wrong.
Team Silent has always been different, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Bloodborne says to see how the sausage is made under Miyazaki's creative direction while giving the spotlight to the studio creators and formula consistently delivering interesting and original experiences. And Bloodborne, I guess, is just the one he picked. That would be the most interesting. That would be fascinating for sure. Prince of the Universe says Hollow Knight Silksong. Maybe this is a cheat answer since the game isn't even out yet, but I've always found this game's existence to be an interesting story. He wrote like a whole article here, and I appreciate it. I did read it, Prince, but it's a lot. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a story to be told there. I don't know if it's going to
because he's a noted PsychOdyssey fan. And he has a lot of passion to say about game development.
Brucey the Wizard says RuneScape. Old school RuneScape.
Okay.
Being a fly on the wall during the Wild West.
The pre-Wild Dark Ages.
Yeah, being a fly on the wall during the Wild West era of early internet and the first MMORPG would be fascinating. WoW could also be a good one, but RuneScape comes from humble beginnings, and the crazy rapid expansion of that studio during the early days of the industry could be cool to watch. Very, very true. And lastly, Skylar, and I would like to note that it's team whoever has Zelda is the hashtag on the name. That'd be Nolan. Says Mother 3. For its all it says is for its crazy length of development. I don't know the story behind Mother 3, but I know it's kind of a storied historic game. I guess what was that, like in development hell for quite some time, or?
I don't actually know much about the development. I just know it is a loved game that never got localized officially in the West.
Maybe that's why it would make for an interesting documentary. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for submitting. I think maybe this is the way I'll start trying to do this for top threes in the future, because it seems to get the most interaction here. So thank you for submitting. We appreciate it.
Can I mention a few real quick?
Oh yeah, I already gave honorable mentions.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to do them.
Bitch, we moved past honorable mentions a while ago, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. God damn it. Okay. I mean, now I'm flustered. I would love to see like half of the catalog from Rare get a look at. The Strike series from EA, which was like that fledgling, like EA's finally starting to come out with interesting stuff, and they're building themselves up. Like Amy Hennig worked on those. I would also, again, BioShock Infinite. I think there's a fascinating story to be told there.
For sure.
I would love to see the history of Sid Meier's work and like all the sim games, like SimCity 2000, and how that's an incredible game. I'm surprised no one mentioned a Zelda game.
I did say Breath of the Wild a while ago, just like for the
We did?
sheer scope of it. Yeah, it was
Okay.
one of the first honorable mentions.
Okay, but like
I
also
think
like
any Zelda would
Ocarina
be-
or
I think any Zelda game would be interesting to look at. But I said Breath of the Wild because of the scope of it. Obviously, is just like I want to wrap my head around how do you build something like that? It's crazy.
or like Majora's Mask would be really interesting to me. Like I have a soft spot for that game, but also like you take a formula that you've built, you don't have time to develop it for the next generation. It's got to come out in your current system. How do you make the most of everything you've built over the course of 5 years?
And didn't that turn around? Wasn't that like?
It was like
that,
2
wasn't that
years.
It was 2 years of development.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting case of like how do you reuse some of the assets and make something totally different, which was cool.
And also one last one, Mass Effect 3. I think that would be fascinating.
How do you talk about the ending for like?
Oh, that would be
time.
half of it, but also like, how do you figure out how to wrap around all these gameplay decisions? And like, eventually there was a point where they had to like go, okay, we couldn't do this, we will substitute it with this. But what was that decision? And like, how did that come about?
It would be interesting for sure. Okay. Last order of business tonight, and then we're gonna wrap up. I'll make this very quick because we tend to do this at the beginning of all of our shows, and it goes on for a while. But I don't want to. We didn't do a show last week, so I want to quickly squeeze in a Fantasy Critic update for everyone following along at home because some shit has happened. Notably, last week we didn't record. Brad, in all of his fucking wisdom, decided to inject some spice into our life by putting the unannounced 3D Mario platformer in play. He bid on it, only $1. He was very open about it. He's like, I bid $1 on this. Here's a screenshot. Of course. Which obviously, there's only one chance to get a 3D Mario platformer, right? We're talking like nobody here knows if it exists. It's a 50-50 shot at this point. And all of us knew that if the day came when they announced that game, everybody would throw down every dollar they had left in their budget to try and get that game.
It's the only game that can score higher than Zelda, really.
It's the only,
what else could it be?
And for people who are doubting,
unless
Brad's
GTA comes out or something, it's just this is the one that has.
If anybody's doubting Brad's statement, if you go into Open Critic and look up Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey has one point above Breath of the Wild. So you're right. If like a direct follow up to Odyssey, whether it's Odyssey 2 or just kind of something in the same vein as Mario Odyssey or whatever is announced, it would have the best chance of getting more points than Zelda. The catch being that nobody would obviously bid on it until it existed. But of course, Brad goes and bids $1 on it because once it's in play,
once it's in play, can't do any dumb shenanigans later. I don't trust any of y'all.
So what happened?
Now it's.
So what happened? He ruined my weekend. Is what happened. I if you go look at the history, I bid on this thing probably 10 times. Like I changed my bid.
You can't see all those bids. I don't think.
No, I can see them. Can you not see them?
You can see your own personal choices.
Oh, cool. So I just revealed something that y'all didn't actually know. That's wonderful.
Thanks.
I went back and forth on that like 10 times. And you can see it in the history. But since y'all can't see that,
I never changed my bid from it.
I can see Brad bid $1 on it. I came in afterwards assuming that since it was in play, everybody was going to probably bid something on it, right? So I started high, and then I lost. I went back and forth, and then Brad goes and opens a fucking reset era thread asking if people think it's likely to even happen, and most people were like, "No, you're fucking crazy." So I dropped my bid.
Let me pull the stats real quick.
Okay, the point is, I ended up. I'm $5. I'm putting $5 on it. That way, worst case scenario, I get it. It doesn't get announced. I still have my unconditional drop. I can drop it. Good. And assuming I would probably lose it to somebody else. And guess what? Nolan tried to bid on it. Nolan bid $3 on it. But imagine if nobody else had bid on it, and nobody was like, everyone's like,
The
Brad,
whole
fuck
idea
you.
was to pick it up. The whole idea was to pick it up for like no money. Like
Right.
it was for me. It was like if I get it, I get it. But like the only way I'm gonna win is if this comes out and I still have all my money to get some other crazy shit. Right?
And you
Like
don't have an unconditional drop anymore.
I
So
don't. But again, I'm playing like long shots. I'm throwing Hail Marys here. That's all I can
So
do.
my point is, I threw myself upon the sword, and I picked up Super Mario, an unannounced 3D Mario platformer for $5, and it's probably going to end up being the thing I have to drop with my unconditional drop. But the point is, I didn't end up breaking the bank to get it, and if it does get announced, it's going to pull in a lot of points, so that's exciting. But if I hadn't bid on that, no one would end up with it, and if it was announced, we'd all be fucked. We could all just throw in the towel, go home.
But see, here's the problem for you, Nick, is that you are still feeling a lot of anxiety about Redfall. And now you have a very, very difficult decision to make.
No. Here's the thing.
I still think that's a game worth holding on to, though. Redfall is not a game worth ditching.
I'm not so worried about Redfall that I'm gonna ditch it.
Yeah.
It's just I'm just nervous about it because it could be. I think it's like at the worst. I think worst case scenario, Redfall is gonna be like a 78, like worst case scenario. So we'll see what happens. But so that happened
this week.
So this week we have 2 new bids. Rift of the Necrodancer. I think we all know who bid on that. That's a Nolan joint.
Well, I don't necessarily know. So I will say that last week instead of the podcast, I kind of finally had a big long conversation with Carlos about Fantasy Critic. We watched some trailers. If y'all want to hear his thoughts on a lot of the stuff going on in the league, we kind of went down everybody's lists. So check out the VOD, I guess, on that. But
we are going to do a league focused podcast with Carlos middle of the year, probably.
But it was good to hear his thoughts, and we did watch a trailer for Rift of the Necrodancer. So this could be Carlos, could be maybe whoever was watching the stream, if anybody did. So,
so that's a bid, and also appearing on the bid list this week is unannounced mainline 2D Mario platformer. What the fuck?
There's a rumor out there. There is a rumor out there.
This motherfucker.
Look it up.
Just trying to
look it up. There's a rumor out there. Someone who's been
wild.
Someone who has been right before.
I know. So, anyways, that's what's happened in the past week. Dead Island 2 came out, and surprising absolutely nobody, it ended up with what we pretty much said. It was like a low 70s. So, Chris Davis, you dodged a little bit of a bullet. You only would have picked up like 2 or 3 points with that.
I can't believe we had to talk you off that ledge. Are you crazy?
It was a really well done trailer. I'll put it that way.
I mean, here's the thing. I still want to play
rid of it. I'm really glad you got rid of it. I don't want anybody to like get Forspoken or Storyteller because it just doesn't feel good on anybody's side.
Storyteller is down
you don't
to
want to see it.
Brad's down to -1 point on Storyteller. I am officially no longer the only person.
69.
I am no longer the only person with a game with negative points. So welcome to the club, Brad.
I saw that game go from a 76 to a 69 over the past month. It is crazy.
Nice.
This poor little 2-hour puzzle game.
Just got fucked. Okay.
Dead Island 2 is at 75 now, by the way.
That's not bad.
Theoretically, that would have been bad, but
it would have been a bad pick,
it wouldn't have been terrible.
It's a bad pick. It was always a bad pick, and it turned out to be a bad pick.
I want to see the documentary about Dead Island 2.
That would be interesting, actually. Also, just worth mentioning, Blasphemous 2 got announced officially with a release date of this summer, I guess. So
not just that, also because there was a Nintendo Direct, Indie Direct, and also Oxenfree 2 got a trailer and a date. So
those are both on Carlos's list. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got Jedi Survivor too. So we're gonna see where that ends up for him next week. Okay,
but he's also got Silk Song, and people are just that still hasn't appeared. So
Silk Song's gonna drop.
The year is young. The year is young. Okay, guys, that is it for our show tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Of course, next week we'll get back to our usual talking about headlines, talking about games we're playing. We're going to have a lot more stuff. We're going to talk about Burning Shores. We're going to talk about, I guess Star Wars won't be out before next week's show. It'll be the week after. But we'll have plenty to talk about next week. Was I hallucinating, Brad? Have you been playing that Ghostwire Tokyo expansion? Or not expansion or update?
Well, I've been playing Ghostwire Tokyo since I never.
Yeah, but with the
finished
update, or
playing
is the update out? I don't fucking know. I just saw
It's
you
out.
playing it.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
there's an update. There's like new skills you can dodge now. I mean, it's
I'm just
it's
also Street Fighter 6 demo
Ghostwire
dropped today.
Tokyo is such a okay. Yeah, thanks. I was talking about Ghostwire Tokyo, your most hated game of 2022.
No, I'm trying to give
The
people a
only
little
one you
taste.
sold.
I'm just trying to give people a little taste of what's coming next week. So yeah, Ghostwire Tokyo maybe,
I'm
Burning
not gonna be
Shores
talking about
maybe. Brad, you're missing the point here. Street Fighter 6 demo, I'm sure we'll talk about that. So good show lined up next week. Be there Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. In the meantime, 4playernetwork.com is the website. You can find all of our podcasts there. And of course, if you're not already, we'd love to have you in our Discord. Join us at discord.gg/4player, the number 4player. There's links all over our website. Go find it. Join us. We'd love to have you. Until next week, good night. Play video games. Be good to each other. I already said good night, right?
Yes.
I'm tired. Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.